Okay, awesome. So welcome everybody. Thank you so much for making time during what I know for many people is a really, really busy time of the year as things wrap up and we head into holiday times and the new year. So thank you so much for joining today. My name is Alana Ojibwe. I'm with the National Center on Restorative Justice team as the Assistant Director of Education and Outreach, and have been sort of point of contact lead with our team with this new work under the program implementation. So it's great to see some familiar names of folks that I know we've worked with already, but also really exciting that the word has gotten out for folks who are interested in learning more about this opportunity. So really briefly in the beginning, just wanted to start by sharing a little bit about the National Center and our broader work and how this initiative of the program implementation sort of fits into that. So the National Center, oh, sorry. The National Center is funded through Bureau of Justice Assistance to improve criminal justice policy and practice in the U.S. through educating and training the next generation of justice leaders, supporting and leading research focused on restorative justice and addressing social inequities, and supporting implementation of restorative justice programs. Now we can go to the next slide. So obviously today the primary focus will be talking about this new subaward opportunity under program implementation, which is our newest initiative of work under our grant team, which is really exciting. But also wanted to just share for those of you who may not be familiar with our work or who haven't connected with us already that program implementation is one of four what we call our pillars and sort of main areas of work. The other ones obviously include public education, higher education, and research. And we just wanted to share this as a starting point for those of you who may not be familiar already, but all of our work is really around sort of advancing training and education opportunities for those who are interested in learning more about restorative justice applications within their own context, teaching about restorative justice. We have a coaching program for those interested in getting mentor support that might be working as practitioners. So a lot of different areas of work, and all of it is free and publicly accessible. So we really encourage folks, if you haven't already, please visit our website, NCORJ.org, if there's other opportunities, other resources that you or folks that you work with might be interested in using or connecting through other network opportunities that we have. So just wanted to share this as a starting point, and thanks so much for our other team members, a couple joining today, Avery and Lindsay, and our fabulous partners at Center for Justice Innovation. Koila's here today. So we'll be sharing kind of back and forth for the info on this subaward opportunity for today. So thank you all, and I'll pass it over to Koila.
Thanks so much, Alana. You can go to the next slide. So as Alana shared, the National Center on Restorative Justice partnered with the Center for Justice Innovation, which is a nonprofit organization. We both have community-based sites where we support our community members who are justice involved, as well as partner with criminal justice agencies, often to provide diversion from the criminal legal system. And so we were selected to partner with them to support other jurisdictions who are interested in having a partnership between community-based organizations and a criminal legal organization. And so this past fall and early winter, we were able to meet many sites and offered a 3-day training for them, for folks who were interested in exploring the option of that partnership or expanding on work. And so we're really excited to offer this new subaward opportunity. So we can go to the next slide. So this subaward offers first $250,000, which is really exciting. to be used over the course of 2 years. This is for anyone who is either launching new or is expanding in services, a restorative justice option for cases diverted from the criminal legal system at various points. We're not specific about where along the continuum that has to be, and are really open to different innovative ideas. For the first solicitation that we had opened, the Criminal Justice Agency had to be the primary applicant partnered with the CBO. For this application, we're far more open and flexible with who may apply. So next slide. So we're anticipating giving out 2 awards with a start date of April 1st. And as I said before, it'll be for the course of 2 years. And applications are going to be due February 14th. We know this is a tight timeline, but we're hoping to get the funding out as soon as possible.
All right. So, and I think throughout this, I'm just gonna plug in as we go questions that have come up from folks already in terms of sort of frequently asked. So I'll just kind of plug those in. But in terms of who can apply, we're looking for criminal justice agencies or community-based nonprofit organizations. And this application will require detailed information of exactly what that program design and that sort of referral connection process looks like. The main thing, though, I want to just emphasize is that there has to be that sort of partnership in some way between a justice system agency or partner and whoever will be doing, whether it's a CBO, whoever will be doing this sort of community-based referral process. So that would be the main thing to highlight here, is that that partnership is clear. And in terms of who can apply, either entity in terms of the nonprofit side or criminal justice agency, a partner is welcome to apply. They'll just need to sort of name what that partnership is in the application. I'll mention this again in just a minute, but a question I know that has come up around this is around, in terms of the application, the funding itself that can be designated to multiple CBOs or different providers. That'll just need to be detailed but it will need to go to one fiscal sponsor. So throughout the application, one person or one entity will be applying, but then how those funds get dispersed or who sort of is holding the fiscal sponsorship is up to sites. We'll just need that sort of detailed of if it is going to be split up or if it is through a different fiscal sponsorship. That will just need to be detailed in the application. And we can go to the next slide. So we just wanted to highlight here, all of this information is available in the RFP, which I will see. I'm gonna put the link in the chat for those who haven't seen where the RFP lives on our website, so that this is fresh. But so all of this is outlined in more detail in the RFP itself, but these are sort of the main components of the application. The abstract, the main thing there that we're really looking to see is around, an emphasis on how specifically this subaward funding will be used to expand an existing program or establishing a new. So the emphasis on sort of what this will be doing as a new opportunity for sites that doesn't already exist. So highlighting that as the abstract, and then the narrative is really the piece that where there's more space to go into more comprehensive detail about everything from sort of the program design, what you're anticipating in terms of what it'll look like, what the referral process would be, who the population, the service population ideally will be. So a lot more detail in terms of who the partners will be, just the full kind of description of what the need is for the either new or expanded programming or service that's available, and then more depth in terms of what the design and implementation plans will look like. The capacities and competencies component of that is really looking at sort of the who is involved and making sure that there's, again, that partnership clearly laid out and established between, again, the language is intentionally sort of broad so that it can be flexible depending on what that looks like, knowing sites have really different relationships and where those referral partnerships are coming from. So it's broadly a criminal justice system entity or partner, and then a community-based organization or partner. And so detailing, again, just sort of the who in the background of who those different partners will be and what their role will be connected to this project in particular. The timeline, as is laid out in the RFP as well, but want to just name that it's so there is a 24-month window of when the subaward gets issued through when that should be sort of what the budget is based on, is this 24-month window. But just want to name that there is also a little bit of flexibility with what it says in the RFP as of now is starting April 1st. But if there are sites and if you have a really set plan and would like to be getting started earlier than that, that's a possibility. If there's a slight, more time, that 24-month window starts when starts as you sort of outline it. So if that is May 2025, that's also okay. So there's flexibility with that, but the main thing is making sure that that sort of is the timeline. The 24-month window is what the application is focusing on when your site would be planning to start, and then what that 24-month period following that would look like. And then that's the same to matching up with what the budget would be within that 24-month timeline. So the 250,000 is intended as spread out through that 24-month window, but totally flexible in terms of it doesn't have to be allocated as 50% of it in the first year, 50% of it in the second. It can really be dispersed and used however is most needed and relevant to the site. The other thing, though, to just mention in terms of the budgeting piece, the way that funds are issued is through reimbursement. And so the lump subaward funds would not be issued April of 2025. They get issued through reimbursement. And so that's another reason that seeing a clear plan for the budget and how programming implementation would be rolled out and when funds would be most needed, maybe it would be a larger cost up front and then sort of rolling out throughout. That's totally fine. It just needs to be laid out again to see what the plan would be across that 24-month period. And then the last piece is the letters of support, and that is, again, similar to the folks who may be named in the proposal narrative piece in terms of who the key partners are that'll be involved in the program implementation, to see that they are on board, and everyone who is named as a part of the process, who's a part of the program, to see that there is awareness for one and support of what that'll look like for this new program implementation. Before going to the next slide, I'm just going to pause really briefly and look at, actually go ahead to the next slide if that's okay. And I'll look at the questions, Quayla, while you hop into this part.
Sounds good. In the name of transparency, we want to be clear about how we're awarding points or percentages for each of the application component parts. So as Alana highlighted, the bulk of the writing of the application is going to be within that program narrative. And so description of the issue, which is in program narrative, will constitute for 5% of the score. Project design and implementation is also within that project narrative, and it's 40% of the score. Capabilities and competencies also within the proposal narrative is 35%. The timeline, we are factoring into project design and implementation. The budget is a standalone category at 15%. And then finally, for the sites that had previously applied and been awarded the training during this fall, there will be an additional 5% points awarded to them in the application process, and just wanted to be transparent about that. Letters of support, as Alana highlighted, are also really important, and for us support the feasibility of project design, and there are lots of hopes for collaborations, and having that letter of support from organizations shows an actual willingness and commitment to partner. So, yeah. So we've said this before, but just want to reiterate, because we know it is a tight timeline given the holidays and lots of vacations happen. Applications are due February 14th. Depending on the number of applicants and the level of applications that we're receiving, finalists may be invited for an interview. Though if you don't get an interview, that's not necessarily a bad thing. We may have just decided to not do interviews. And we're hoping to send out awards notifications by March 5th, so that for those programs starting April 1st, you can get all the things aligned to make that happen.
So that is sort of the broad overview. I'm looking at some of the questions in the chat that maybe have not been answered. Yes, this could apply to providing community-facing RJ programming. That is ideal.
Well, I think the question is it, I mean, this person can come off mute if you like to. Oh, actually, we're a webinar. That's not how it works. But it would have to be it has to be a partnership with a criminal justice organization or agency. So we're thinking along the continuum that a case is maybe picked up, there is an arrest made, perhaps. Maybe it's going along to trial, or it's this person is has been sentenced and is coming home to probation or parole. We're thinking along that continuum. If there is a RJ process offered in response to that initial harm or conflict, that is the type of processes we're supporting. And we are assuming that the process is then offered by a community-based organization. So I hope that it feels more clear.
Yeah, and then this got, I think, answered in the chat, but there is intentionally broad language around what a criminal justice agency or partner looks like, just because we know that it it looks really different, and so I don't want to name specifically like it has to be through a DA's office or just knowing that there's flexibility. I think, as Quayla said, that piece around having some sort of role and touch point within the criminal justice continuum, whether that's wherever that may be, and having access to making referrals is, I think, the main piece. So to the question around, do agencies have to be doing direct service, or can institutes housed within universities be considered? I think some of these questions, we may just need more information about what that, they don't have to be doing. Be curious to hear more about what the direct service means, but I think, and then just sort of like what the role of the institute is within the university, because they would have to, in some way have a connection with making referrals and have some connection to the criminal justice system in terms of, what the RJ service or referral partner would be doing. Um,
Can programs be targeting youth diversion? Yes, they may. I know for our previous solicitation, we focused specifically on adult populations. We are open to having youth applicants.
There was another question about the timing for funding and, if a particular site wasn't able or didn't need the funding until later this summer or the fall, could they still apply? I would say the answer is yes. It just wouldn't extend that, so that 24-month window wouldn't start. I guess I should have been more specific when I said there was flexibility.
I'm like,
Oh, sorry.
sorry to cut you off, Alana.
No, that's okay.
I would just ask Lindsay if she wants to chime in. I do know there is some flexibility. I don't know if until
Right, that's what I was gonna say. That I think is too late, but yeah, I do think, yeah, Lindsay, feel free to hop in on this one, but I think that as long as, it's okay with this, with your site, that it might just be a smaller window of time, that it would be, say, if you didn't need the funding until October, that it would still then go until April or May of 2027. So, so if that worked, I think when the funding got issued, if you needed a later start date for some reason, it just wouldn't necessarily extend on the back end as well. But Lindsay, feel free to hop in.
Yeah, just to chime in on that. So we need to be wrapping up these subawards by September of 2027, really the beginning of September of 2027 at the latest. And so in that case, you'd be looking at a 23-month, or maybe 22-month, I guess, period of performance period for the subaward if you're starting that late. But you can certainly still apply and just outline that would be the timeline and the reason for that.
Could a partner org be school referrals with the goal of using RJ as a means to avoid suspensions and expulsions? While we definitely understand the school to prison pipeline, this is specifically for criminal justice agencies and unfortunately could not be for school referrals. Does the partnership with the criminal justice agency need to be established prior to the application? It does not. This is where the letter of support would come in handy to support how that the criminal justice agency is interested in that partnership, as well as in the program narrative. There's a section outlining how you intend to build that relationship and stay in communication between the two organizations or more organizations.
In terms of the funding support being used for, oh no, where did that question just go? Maybe it got answered.
I apologize. That was me. I typed an answer to that one.
Oh, okay.
Which, yeah, the answer was yes, it can be used to cover staffing, but we are just due to our own financial regulations only able to pay by reimbursement, though we can do that, at a pretty quick intervals. So for example, we could do monthly reimbursement. That will be all just part of how we set up these individual subawards.
Okay, sorry, I'm like,
This is great. Lots of questions.
I think this week we answered.
The question around projects that are intended to support set-asides, pardons, or record sealing considered along the continuum. I think we would just need to hear more about that, but the programming is specifically intended for programs that are utilizing restorative practices and restorative justice within that partnership. And so I'm not sure that sounds clear from this question if it's broader sort of justice reform efforts versus restorative justice programming specifically.
Yeah, would this cover law enforcement making direct referrals in lieu of writing a ticket or summons? Again, if the law enforcement agency is making referrals to a community-based organization that is then doing restorative justice processes in lieu of those tickets or summons, I think you could make the case for that. Oh, absolutely. Can you describe the technical assistance or training that you're providing to grantees? I briefly mentioned the prior solicitation offered a 3-day training for sites to really introduce those concepts of restorative justice and what it looks like. The training that would be offered along with this grant is a implementation training. So that's really looking at how to support the partnership between the criminal justice agency and the community-based organization, meetings, what does the MOU look like, who is collecting data and what, and sharing what. So getting down into the nitty-gritty of what that relationship looks like and how to keep it an open and transparent relationship through the grant and ideally beyond. And we will, in addition to that one-time 3-day training, you can write an additional training budget if that's required for your program. And it can be with anyone. It would not have to be through the Center for Justice Innovation. And throughout the grant term, we'll also have monthly check-in calls with both both agencies to ensure that case referrals are going well and to help with any of the sticking points that may come up through the implementation of a new program.
Quick response, yes, there are two $250,000 awards. So we'll be issuing to 2 different sites. So one subaward is 250,000. We have 2 available. Would this support a program that's doing restorative practices within prisons and survivors rather than primary victims due to restrictions? Yes, and again, I would say the reason on both ends that the language is intentionally broad is to allow for some flexibility of sort of who the program population would be targeting and what the restorative practices look like within that context. So so there's flexibility with that. It sounds like the justice system partner in this case is maybe Department of Corrections. But yes, there's flexibility for who the program population focus would be. In terms of the reimbursement, there's a question about, is it just staffing reimbursed or all services and supports covered through reimbursement? All are covered through reimbursement. That's sort of how the grant will be issued, is through, yes, these itemized invoices of exactly what, and I guess this is maybe important to name too. The goal is in the application to outline in the budget exactly what the sort of services and supports and plan to use funds over that 24-month period would be. However, we also understand, as long as it's not hugely significant changes, that there are shifts throughout that period of time that may be different from the original budget. So for example, if certain amount was allocated towards program supports, and then 9 months down the road, it feels like there's a stronger need or desire to have particular, say, training or some kind of opportunity more targeted, and needing to sort of reshift funding for that. It would still need to be reimbursed and itemized for what that funding looks like, but there is, we do recognize that from the onset of applications to when funding is actually getting used, that sometimes there are shifts with that.
Would it cover costs related to training and managing volunteers who implement RJ programming? Absolutely. Like if that's what the funding is needed, where the funding is needed, then yes. Can an organization that works with multiple communities apply to facilitate the development of RJ programs in several communities through TA training and coordination? I want to say yes, if I'm reading this question correctly. I think our goal when reading applications is by the end of the grant period, and ideally during the grant period, will the RJ program be up and running and taking cases or case referrals? We ideally want that happening within the grant term. We know it's a short time, and for new programs, there is going to be a lot of planning and training and coordination in the beginning, but ideally by the end of the 2 years, the RJ program is up and running. When speaking of a partnership with a CJ agency, are we talking a simple MOU? So again, the partnership does not have to be established. My assumption is that if you have an MOU, it is already established, and that does not have to be the case. If you simply have that letter of support and are working to build the relationship with the agency, and can show that through the application, we would consider that a partnership.
In terms of the reimbursement, and whether that means that organizations and agencies will have to front the cost of those funds, yes. And so through reimbursement, whoever is the fiscal sponsor, or however the funds will be getting issued, they will only be issued through reimbursement.
But just again, to clarify on that point, because I know that that can be a strain for organizations, we can do that reimbursement as frequently as works for each subaward recipient. So it could be, for example, fronting the cost for 1 month and then we reimburse on a monthly schedule. So it's not like you have to be able to front the entire cost of the project and then we're reimbursing in one lump sum at the end. We can do it monthly, we can do it quarterly. But yes, due to our restrictions, just being a project that is funded ultimately by BJA and DOJ, we have to pay by reimbursement.
And speaking of reimbursement, I'm glad there's a question about this. This is highlighted in the RFP with more detail of how funds can and can't be used. But a very common question, unfortunately, is around food. And since this is through BJA federal funding, there are restrictions around using funds for costs for food. As just one example, there's more information again in the RFP within the budget section of what funds can and can't be used for.
Can this grant cover restitution support? I think that is a BJA question that, and I think there was a question about food, which I know because it's federal funding, it wouldn't cover food. I don't know how the federal government would classify restitution.
Yeah, Jacob, if you're on and able to provide a little bit more information on your question, I'm not entirely sure what you're meaning, like using it directly for restitution or for programs that include that as a part of the service. So if you're able to offer a little more information, I just wasn't quite clear on that question.
This question around starting point for funds, and if a program could start with asking for 50,000. So for the application, you would need to describe how funds would be used, or I should say, we are prioritizing applications that have a plan and need for using the full $250,000. Covers hours staffed worked.
I can answer that one, Alana, if
Okay.
helpful. So yes, so the question is around if you're using the subaward to cover staff time, whether there's a tracking system for hours worked. And so yes, you will have to have some system, if you're saying that this person is spending, for example, 50% of their time, then you need to have some system for documenting that they are actually spending that amount of time. And so we can share with you the systems that other subawardees and we ourselves use for that effort reporting, and we can support with that. But yes, there does have to be some system to show that staff that are devoting time are actually devoting that time to this project.
We'll take maybe two more questions, and then I want to make sure we can also leave the contact email in the chat if you have more specific or site specific questions, or if anything that we did answer still feels like you have more questions or it's not clear. There's another question kind of similar around the restitution. Would this provide funding for a program that does accountability restorative plans for youth that are post adjudication with restitution? I think this is similar to what Lindsay had answered before. We would just need a little bit more detail of, it sounds like that is through the program itself that you issue the restitution, but would need a little more description on what exactly that means or what it would be used for. Could the funds go towards building a database operating system for records?
I'm like, if I would say yes, especially as we're supporting a partnership between two organizations who probably want to be tracking the program and what's going on. So yes. Is that answered? Yes, I think inherent in a criminal justice system involvement, we are thinking that it would be some type of diversion, or at the very least supporting a case that isn't within the criminal legal system.
Okay, any other final questions? If not, oh, thank you. We're putting, so the email address that just went into the chat, the contact@ncorj.org, is the best email point of contact for any other questions, both things that still feel that came up from today, or as you start looking at the application in more detail and have questions, anything at all in terms of the application process. As things come up in the next few weeks, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for joining today. Hopefully this was helpful, and we're really excited to hear from you again and read through these applications.